Hello, and thank you for joining us for another Roku Developers webinar. I'm Nicole Summerall, Developer Advocate here at Roku, and today we'll be joined by some familiar faces, Chris and Ram, to review new features and enhancements available in Roku Resource Monitor 4.0. As always, the presentation will be followed by a live Q&A through Slido. The Slido link for this webinar is go.roku.com/RRM-4.0-webinar-QA. The link to the Slido is in the webinar blog post, registration, and in the Zoom chat. Once you ask a question, your fellow attendees will upvote it or downvote it, which will help determine if it gets read on air. Please be aware that while we do not comment on our roadmap or make other forward-facing commitments during Q&A, we do welcome feature requests and other suggestions around what would help make Roku OS better. If you have to leave early or want to share this session, we will post a recording of it on the Roku Developers YouTube channel, Roku Developer Video Portal, as well as the Roku Developers channel. So without further ado, let's get started. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Nicole. Today, we're going to be looking at Roku Resource Monitor version 4. And the first thing I want to cover is OS requirements. Resource Monitor version 4 requires Roku OS 14.1 or better. But in addition to that, there are a couple of network settings that we want to be sure are correct before we jump in and start using the tool. First of all, as always, just like with previous versions, your device has to be in dev mode. But in addition to that, there's a new network setting. So I have a device set up here. This is a Roku Express. It has 14.5 on it. And I'm going to go into settings. And then I'm going to go to System, Advanced System Settings, and then Control by Mobile Apps. And in here, there's a thing called Network Access. And you'll see right now it's set to limited. If it's set to limited or disabled, Resource Monitor will not work correctly because it will not be able to make the ECP calls that it needs to get data from the device. And it will yell at you if you try and do it wrong. So, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go over to Resource Monitor now, and I'm going to try and connect to this device. And when I do, you'll see that I get an alert that says you can't do this, you're in limited mode, and it even tells me how to fix it, right? Which I'm going to do now. So let me get out of that, and I'll come back to the device, and I will change this to permissive. Either enabled or permissive will work. I'm going to do permissive. It's going to ask me to confirm. Yes, I really want to do that. And then now, if I go back to Resource Monitor and try to connect to the device again, you'll see that it works, and I get the list of channels as expected. Okay. So that's system requirements. I'm going to go ahead and choose this side-loaded version of Roku Media Player that I have installed. But before we get into actually looking at data from that channel, I want to show you a new bit of interface in the tool. So if I come over here toward the bottom of the left-hand side, you'll see there's this new widget called Panel Configuration. And if I click on that, I get a list of all of the panels that are visible in the tool, and there are checkboxes to turn them all on and off. So I'm going to cancel out of this for a minute. You may remember that in previous versions of the tool, there were two buttons up here next to the title of each panel. So in addition to this caret for collapsing the panel, there was a little, looked like an eyeball button that was used to enable and disable the panel. But when you disabled the panel in previous versions, it just kind of went gray, and it was still there, taking up space in the tool. And if you wanted to hide it, you had to take that second step of hitting the caret button to collapse it. And even then, the bar for it was still there. The title bar was still there. So in version 4, we have this new panel configuration setting. So if I come back in here, you can turn off entirely the panels you're not interested in. For instance, for the demo we're going to do today, we are really only interested in the bright script and scene graph stuff. So I can go in here and turn off everything else, and those panels will be completely removed from the interface of the tool. And not only that, the other nice thing about this is that it will prevent the tool from attempting to gather that data from the device. So it takes load off of the device. It's that many fewer ECP calls that are happening. So some of you may have seen cases with previous versions of the tool where if you had a really complex app and you had all the panels turned on and you were polling every second for data, you would occasionally see blips where the tool would drop a sample. And that was because the device just couldn't respond fast enough with the data it needed. And so that's why those samples would get dropped. So now you turn off a panel, it won't even try to collect that data, and those problems should be less bad now. I'm going to turn this scene graph one back on. So these are the three panels we're interested in today: bright script objects, rendezvous, and scene graph nodes. So I'm going to save that, and you'll see now in the main interface, those are the only three panels that are there. There are no bars for other panels, nothing, just the three panels that we're interested in. Okay, so let's now start a session and gather some data. So I'm going to start a session. I'm going to fire up my side-loaded version of Roku Media Player. And we should start seeing some data come in. And I'm just going to navigate around a little bit and maybe play a song for a few seconds. Just 5 or 10 seconds of this. And you can see, the data updating in real time as we're going, popping in every second. I do have the polling period set to 1 second right here. So about 10 seconds of that. And then we're going to back out and just kind of go back up the tree here to the main interface. Okay, I think that's good enough. I'm going to go ahead and stop this session and we'll take a look at the data. So here's the, as long as we're here in the export dialog, you've always had this option to download the session data at the end of the session. So with the panel configuration I was talking about a minute ago, another nice thing about that is if you have panels turned off, it's not collecting data. It also won't export that data to a file. So your export files can be smaller. If you're exporting a session to look at later or to share with somebody else, that session file will only include the data you're interested in. The panels that are turned off will not be there at all, which is nice. So let's end that session. And let's move this out of the way. I think we're done with that for now. All right, let's take a look at this data. And let's start with the bright script objects panel. So in version 4, the bright script objects panel has a lot more data in it than it used to. We've combined multiple other panels into this single panel. So it's showing you a lot more data, a lot more quickly. It's much more glanceable. You don't have all that visual clutter of 2, 3 different panels to sift through to find what you're looking for. So this main view is probably pretty familiar. You have the object counts for the top 10 objects in your channel. The colors are very interesting for me. I really like the colors. Let me kind of talk a little bit through the colors. So what I like with the colors is you can kind of follow the path of a particular object type through time. So for instance, here, the purple is kind of interesting. So purple, if I hover over this, purple is RO-associative arrays. But you can see that the purple, even though it's, number 1 at the beginning, it drops here and then it drops here again. So here it's below red, here it's below red and blue, and then kind of stabilizes, right? And similar with the blue, you can see here the blue is the third one down, and here it becomes the second one down. So that kind of tells you that your number of RO booleans in your channel is growing relative to some of the other types in the channel. And there are others that do things like that to here, green and this turquoise color kind of dance around a little bit. But I really like that for the glanceability. It's really nice to be able to look at that and see your object counts changing with time. And as always, you can click on one of these and it'll show you the list of the top 10 during that polling period. You also have this all objects tab. If you want to see things other than the top 10, you can see the entire list of every type of object happening during that polling period. The other cool thing, I guess I can talk about this black line. This black line is the total objects in the channel. So even though we're looking at top 10 for the bars right now, the black line is always the total for all objects. And so that's, again, a very glanceable way to let you see, okay, the top 10 objects are taking up the vast majority of the allocations during a given polling sample, which makes sense. But that can, in other scenarios, that black line can be even more handy. So let's jump in here to this guy that says thread and object configuration. So when I'm in here, there's two tabs, threads and objects. We're going to talk about threads first. So this is a list of all the threads that existed during the session. And there were 5 in our particular case, but maybe I'm not interested in all of these. Maybe I only want to see information about the DLNA and USB threads. And so I can turn these other ones off, right? If I don't care about them, I only want to see data for these 2 threads. And then when I hit save over here, the graph is going to re-render. And now things look quite a bit different. First of all, the colors are much more stable, right? Things are not jumping around like they were before. So in those 2 particular threads, object allocations are much more stable than in the app overall. You can also see that the gap between the top of the bar and the black dots has gotten bigger, which makes sense. That's because the objects allocated by those 2 threads take up less of the overall object count for the app. Okay. So let's go back in here. I'm going to turn all these back on. I can just hit this. Okay, so now we're back to top 10 all threads. Again, maybe I'm not interested in just the top 10. Maybe I want to be able to look at a specific set that I define. Well, I can do that too. So if I come over here to this drop down, I can select custom object selection. And if I do that, the graph is going to go blank at first. That's because I haven't selected any custom objects yet. And to do that, I come back over here to this thread and object configuration panel. I choose the objects tab. And here's a list of every object type that existed during my session, right? And again, I can click whichever ones I want. Maybe I want to see strings, but not Booleans. I do want to see associative arrays, and I want to see standard arrays. And so when I click save, again, the graph re-renders, and now I see the data for just those 3. All right, I'm going to go back to top 10. And I'm going to go back and reset this. Okay. The last thing to look at in this panel is over here, where we have this count and memory tabs. So we're looking right now at object counts, top 10, all threads. If I look at memory instead, I'm going to click on this guy. And now the graph is going to re-render, and it's going to change to, instead of showing me object counts, it shows me the memory taken up by those objects. And so again, we're looking at top 10 right now. So you can see that, by far arrays are the worst with almost 8.8 megabytes allocated to them. And then we have RO associative arrays before at 0.05 megabytes, RO strings 0.01, and on down. So this number is obviously not great. Almost 9 megabytes of arrays. So we can drill down and look at just that. So again, I'm going to go to custom object selection. Then I'll go back to the config and turn on only arrays. And we can look at how that grows over time during our session. And you can see it started out very small, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.6, 1.7, and on and on. And I didn't mention it at the beginning, but the reason for that is that I introduced an intentional memory leak into this version of Media Player. And the leak started when I started playing audio. So for those 10 seconds or so that audio was playing during the session, I was intentionally leaking memory into an array. And so that's very obvious here, very easy to track. See, and it's interesting also to compare it to the counts, right? If I look at counts, there's only 38 arrays, right? No big deal. It didn't really grow a ton during the session. It's pretty stable. You wouldn't think that there was a problem just by looking at the count. But as soon as you start looking at the memory, it becomes very obvious that you have a problem and it's happening in an RO array. So that makes it that much easier to track down where that problem might be happening. Okay, that's the BrightScript objects panel. I should probably mention before we move on, that memory feature requires Roku OS 14.5. So if you can use Resource Monitor 4 with 14.1, but if you do, you'll only get counts. In order to get these memory features, you'll need 14.5. Okay, let's take a look at the scene graph nodes panel next. And it works very similarly to the BrightScript objects panel that we just looked at. So everything here should be very familiar. We're looking at top 10 for the whole app. And similar to the other one, I can change to a custom node set. Again, the graph goes blank because I haven't set that up yet. I can go here to node configuration and I can choose the things I'm interested in. Let's say only posters and content nodes. And I save that off and the graph redraws. And now we're looking at the data only for posters and content nodes. And again, as in the other graph, the black line is always the total overall. So we can see that posters and content nodes are only accounting for about 40 out of the 138 total scene graph nodes in the channel. Okay, I'm going to change that back to top 10. And that's scene graph nodes. Let's look at the rendezvous panel next. So let's go back here to this period of time. This is when we were sort of browsing around before we started playing audio. This is the initial load. But I want to look down here at one of these later rendezvous. So just like in previous versions, you can click on these red dots to drill into the data for that polling sample. And when you hover, you also get the nice pop-up that tells you there were 35 rendezvous during this polling sample that took a total of 250 milliseconds. So let's drill into that. So there are some new things in this panel. So as always, we have file names, line numbers, the number of times that particular rendezvous happened during that polling sample, and then the total amount of time that those rendezvous took. But there are two new columns here. We have cumulative events and cumulative duration. So those are the total count and time of that particular rendezvous up to that point in the session. So I clicked on this sample at 11:08, which was, let's take a look back here. This was 19 seconds into the session. So 19 seconds into the session, we have all these rendezvous that have happened, up to this point. So I'm going to actually sort by cumulative duration, right? So what this will do, this will bubble up to the top any rendezvous that have happened a lot so far in the session, right? And I can see this top one is kind of interesting. It's happening on line 8 of this content handler BRS file. It only happened twice in this polling sample, and those two instances took 111 milliseconds. But now I can see that during the session up to that point, that 19-second mark, that same rendezvous had happened 10 times and taken 135 milliseconds. Now, these are small numbers, but if they were bigger, this could point to a problem. So if I look at the overall, the cumulative, I see that, okay, 10 times, 135 milliseconds total. So each one only takes about 13 and a half milliseconds. But then I look over here and I see in this polling sample, there were two that took 111 milliseconds, or about 55 apiece. So why is that discrepancy there? Why does the average instance of this rendezvous only take 13 to 14 milliseconds, but the two that happened during this polling sample took much longer than that? Why is that? That could point to a potential problem in the channel, and is one more data point that you can use to lead you to potential problems in your channel. Okay, so that's cumulative events and durations. The other cool thing in here, and possibly my favorite thing in Resource Monitor 4, is that these are now clickable. So like this one that we just talked about, we've identified there might be a problem with this rendezvous in some cases. So we can drill into it now. And when I click on it, it's going to take me to a code snippet and show me the exact line of code that's causing this rendezvous, right? And it's also going to show me the data about the two instances that happened during this polling period. And you can see one of them was 22 milliseconds and one was 89 milliseconds. So those are both bigger than the average over the course of the session, but this 89 one is much bigger. And so that might be the one to focus in on and see if, maybe there's some kind of problem there or something that could be optimized going on right there. Code snippets. I do think this is my favorite thing in version 4. And that's it. That is a quick overview of everything that's new in Roku Resource Monitor version 4. Back to you, Nicole.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so let's get into it. I'm gonna go ahead and share the QR code for Slido. If you don't already have it, please go ahead and submit your questions and we will start getting to them. So let's see. Do we have any questions yet? Don't be shy, it's fine. And yes, we did have several reports that the video quality wasn't as good as it could be. So when we upload the YouTube replay, we will make sure that we get that sorted out. So
Guys, please fire away your questions. One of the advantages of doing these webinars, it gives you guys direct access to Ram and Chris, and they're here to help you guys answer your questions. This is a very important topic as far as ensuring that your apps are performant and making sure we're giving our customers the best possible experience. So please, we've got time, take advantage of their presence, and Chris and Ram would love to talk to you guys. So please fire away.
like 25 people here. Nobody has a question? Come on, I know somebody's got something. Does everybody just have a case of the Mondays? Is that what it is? All right, our first question is from Luke. Will the new metrics be accessible via command line? Chris or Ram, you want to take a stab at that?
Well, in the sense that you can get them from an ECP response, yes.
Is there anything further in terms of being accessible via command, and what would you like to see? Um, because right now you can read the JSON file directly if you like as well, if you save it to disk. I've used that to look at data. You can, as Chris said, grab it from ECP directly from the device. But if there's anything specific you want to query RRM itself, that would be interesting for us to take back and look at.
And Luke, if you want to follow up with and elaborate on that, you can just go ahead and do that in Slido too. So, okay, we got another question from Luis, not specifically around Roku Resource Monitor, but would it be possible to eventually bring some of the UI improvements to other apps like Profiler? For example, better use of white space, element font scaling, etc.
Yeah, I mean, we can't talk about specific things we're working on, but in general, yes, we are aware that the UI of all the tools could use improving.
Speaking about the profiler, we've also put out a new version of the profiler that would will be much more responsive, and you may want to check that out too. We have not refreshed the UI on that, but we have made some performance improvements and recent improvements to that tool.
Okay, great. Next, we've got a question from Kevin. Is RRM 4.0 more stable than the previous versions? I've had problems with the GUI in the past.
Yeah, I think we can pretty emphatically say yes, there was a pretty big focus on performance and stability in this release.
Okay, awesome. So we have, scroll down. Are we able to see more fine-grained information about the BrightScript object memory usage, e.g., seeing which exact associated array objects are consuming most memory?
Not today,
yeah.
but that is an ask that I think we're aware of.
The best you can see out of RRM is by thread, seeing what the allocations are. We have discussed showing more granular detail, but this is just not the right tool for that level of granularity. But it's something that's on our mind.
And you can dig into information like that using, like if you're using Visual Studio Code, I would point you toward the BrightScript plugin because it integrates with our debug protocol where you can get some more detailed information like that.
Any more questions? We've still got 30 minutes of time, so please feel free to ask more questions. Okay, here we go. Does RM 4.0 allow cumulative results for rendezvous? I would like to see cumulative rendezvous times for all rendezvous over a session and was not sure if that was possible in previous versions.
Yeah, not in previous version, but in version 4, yes. So when you, in fact, this is in the demo. So when this is on YouTube, if you go back and watch the demo part, if you click on the dot on the graph that represents a set of rendezvous, there are those cumulative columns where you can get that data. And so if you wanted to see the entire session, you would just go to the last dot in the session, click on it, and get that table of all the rendezvous in the session.
Just keep in mind when you bring up the rendezvous panel after clicking on the dot, you may have to scroll horizontally to see all the columns because there's a ton of data there, and you can sort by descending order, which is what I always do to find resource contention. And you'll see very clearly the ones with the highest cumulative. Chris showed that really well in his demo. It does jump out. When you have a problem, it jumps out at you. You will not miss it.
Okay. So one of the next questions we got submitted is, can we use RM with beta channels as well as dev?
I believe so. Ram can correct me, but I think as long as you key the device with the key that was used to sign the beta channel, then yes.
Yes.
There we go. That's how I highlight it so we can see which one we're on. Okay. All right. So we got that one. Anything more? Anything more? We still got 30 minutes. Okay. All right. Next question. Does being able to inspect memory allocations on Roku Resource Monitor mean the existing ECP commands have been improved? Are there any other changes to ECP commands that you can share about 14.5?
So to the first part, yes, the ECP commands had to be built out to support the new features. As to what else is new in ECP 4.5, I'm not sure. Maybe Ram knows.
Well, we enhanced the object counts to give you this extra information. So if you query app object counts, that's where you'd look. There's been a lot of changes, lots of improvement. Uh, it's hard to itemize all of them. Um, uh, Maybe Jonathan, we could take that offline and call out what the various enhancements are.
Sure, will do.
Any more questions? Okay, so another question from Kevin. Does that mean you can use RRM with production channels if your device is signed with the package's key?
Yes.
Okay. This one. Okay, question. Do you have any tips on what metrics to look out for on the RRM if incorporating a scene graph video node on a homepage / content discovery page?
Well, my biggest tip would be don't do that. But if you have to, look for very long rendezvous because that's what you're going to see, especially if you're starting and stopping video often as focus moves from poster and poster. Those things, the control field of the video node are probably going to cause some very long rendezvous, especially on less powerful devices.
Okay. All right. We still got some time if y'all want to squeeze in a few more questions. Anybody? Anybody? Bueller?
Well, I can expand a little on that last one, like just in general, not just putting a video node on a grid, but like in general, when you're trying to debug a slow channel, always be looking for long rendezvous. We've done some deep dives on that, and that's kind of the number one thing we keep seeing is that a sluggish sort of non-responsive channel, it's almost always long rendezvous.
Okay. All right. We've got another question. Is there any configuration step needed to display the registry usage data? In all my sessions, the registry used always stays at 0 kilobytes throughout the session.
No, nothing that I'm
Yes,
aware of.
that's not my experience either. In fact, not only can I see the registry information, I can click on it and see the registry contents as well. So um, either you have a channel that is not doing any, uh, not storing to the registry, or maybe you're working in the production version of the channel. Um, Either way, you should be able to see it. So if you're not able to figure that out, we need to find a way to get you unblocked. It's a cool feature. It's one of the less used features for me because my channels, I don't mess with the registry too much. Uh, yeah. I'm going to add, jump from here to what Chris actually mentioned before about rendezvous being one of the first things that I also look at. The cumulative totals, especially, are most useful. And then the object counts per thread, the byte counts per thread, that's core to his demo, is something that's most useful.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, next question. I'm full of forward-facing questions. Do you see the RRM tool evolving over time to show other useful information like network stats and method calls?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, RRM is our standard tool for scene graph. That's not going to change. So it will definitely keep evolving. As will the other tools. Like I can't talk specifically about network stats and method calls, but um, secondary to long rendezvous, maybe the next biggest problem we see with some channels is very long API calls. And so yeah, seeing how long did an RO URL transfer take to make a request, we're certainly aware that that information would be very useful. So yeah, we are actively thinking about those kinds of things and which of them would be most valuable to you guys as developers and how best to present them, which tool to present them in, and how to do that.
Awesome.
Actually, I have a question.
Mhm.
This is more of just like maybe using this time. There's one other thing we haven't talked about. I think that's kind of important. Is Chris, can you talk about the BrightScript profiler and the improvements that were made along with RRM for this past release?
Actually, I might throw that one to Ram.
I'll happily take
'Cause
that.
I know there is a new release, and we focused a lot on performance and stability, just like
Yeah.
in RM, but specific features, I'm not totally there.
In the profiler, we made some changes to how we've architected the app so that we get a 23% decrease in memory use and a 25% increase in performance. Um, Depending on the app, we have seen far higher performance numbers. The the biggest change we did, and I'll share this much, is we detached the UI from the backend processing so that the UI stays responsive all the way through. So it actually feels a lot faster than we have actually made it. But behind the scenes, it just keeps collecting the data, and you can now do things continuously with the UI where previously it would slow down a bit if you had a really large app. Hopefully, that was enough detail, Jonathan.
I'm
Oh,
satisfied.
I love
That
that
was a great
question from
answer.
Luke. Yes, Luke, please try the latest profiler and give us your feedback because we put a lot of work into it and we continue to put more work into it. But uh, these are our bread and butter tools that we want to make sure scale for your usage.
I
And
accidentally,
I will certainly take back the UI refresh request on the profiler.
yes, I accidentally marked that question as I meant to highlight it and I marked it as red. So,
Oops.
my bad. It's the first webinar of the year. We're getting back into the swing of it. So thank you for your patience as we make mistakes. But yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not, because if we need to repost it, we can do that. So any more questions?
I'd just piggyback on what Ram just said. Like, a lot of the new features you guys see in the tool, they come from requests from developers and publishers. So by all means, as you guys are using it, there's something that you think would enhance the tool, please let us know in the developer Slack channel. We'll propagate that to Ram and Chris. But really, like the development of this tool and its progress has largely been shaped by developers. So please keep using it, keep providing your feedback, and we'll keep incorporating it to make the tool as good as it can be.
And if you are running into issues where it's not functioning as expected, you're seeing behavior like we had the question about the registry usage. Also, like let us know about that too, so we can try to troubleshoot and fix that, or find potential bugs if there is any. All right, okay, so we've got another question. When will we be able to view the webinars live on Roku in full 4K rather than just Zoom? So I'm going to go back and do some editing, and I will try to have that for this one uploaded on YouTube very soon. And I know we've had issues in the past where when we've done Zoom webinars, the video, it just, even with our dev summit, where it's grainy and pixelated, I think we thought we had a fix and maybe not so much. but we will try again to make it better in the future. But
I can
for now,
certainly take the, yeah.
no, go ahead. Go ahead, Ram.
So I'm all excited with the next two questions, so I wanted
Oh
to
yeah,
take them, but yes, sorry.
I know, I
All right,
know.
AJ, I love your question about the command line. I would like to know what features you'd like to see. That probably is the most pertinent question here. If you have a particular vision for how you'd use the command line version of this tool, and why, that would be most useful. I'm assuming when you say command line, you may not want to see the UI, or would you like to see the UI? What kind of data would you like to extract from it? How would you like to interact with it? These are all most useful questions. It's it, these are things that we've considered in the past, multiple times. For one reason or the other, we haven't done it, but this is always something that's close to surface for us. So if you can give us enough detail and data, who knows? That might be something that just bubbles to the top for us. This is where your input will make a difference. I'm
Yeah,
going to take the
adding
third
to that
question.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Can I just real quick on that one? Um, just a reminder, I think we touched on this earlier. All the data that you see in RRM, you can get programmatically from a device using ECP. So, I would like to hear like, why is that not adequate? Like, what would you want a command line tool to do that you can't already do just by making ECP requests?
Okay, awesome. Okay, next question. Any corresponding changes to the .bsprof, so I'm assuming Bright Script Profiler file format? Are old profiling files compatible with the new app? I've seen the file is corrupted, some data may be incomplete message, so I'm curious.
In this version of the profiler, there has been no change to the format. There's nothing else to add on that, I guess.
Okay,
I'll
okay.
jump to the next one. Um, are there any plans of exporting RRM sessions as images or other file formats for easier sharing with people who don't have access to the tool? Okay, first, tool is free to download. So that's first thing I'd say. Second, the way we internally share data from the tool is screen captures, or we share the actual session file. For the session file needs another tool. So if you have a different file format that you're curious about that you'd like to see this in, let us know. I'm assuming maybe you want to see it in your favorite profiler tool. Um, just share what you intend with that on the community, and we could take that back. Chris, do you have anything to add on
Yeah.
this?
Well, I would just remind people that the export files are JSON, so you're free to read them, parse them, do whatever you want with them. So I would be interested to see if somebody in the community might be able to take that and build a translation tool that can turn an export file into something else.
Yeah, like something that goes up on Chrome or Preferred. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? We still got time. There, Chris and Ram are here till the end of the hour. So, okay, we got another one. Does RRM do one big
Ooh,
ECP
good
request
question.
for all data? Not sure if this is even a thing, or multiple small ECP requests. What's the estimated performance loss using one approach if possible versus the other?
So it's the second, it's a lot of small requests, and it's typically one request per sample per chart. So at the very beginning of the demo, I showed off that new panel where you can configure which of the charts is visible, and that's how you control that. So if you want to reduce the number of ECP calls that the tool is making during a session, you go in and turn off the panels you're not interested in, and then the tool will not make the ECP requests for that data. The other thing you can do is make the polling period longer, so you can control how often the tool polls the device for this data. During the demo, I had it to 1 second, which is the smallest, but you can make it much bigger if you need to take load off the device for whatever reason, or if you're just not interested in data that frequent. Um, those are kind of the two main strategies: is to turn panels on and off, and to adjust the sample rate.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? Any suggestions? Any elaborations? Okay. If sampling can be user controlled, do ECP requests for object counts reflect the accumulated totals like rendezvous, or is it an instant snapshot?
I can take this one. First, the sampling is controlled for the entire session. So you set the sample interval you want before you start the session. Once you start it, you can't change the sampling interval until you stop the session. When we do ECP requests, for example, for rendezvous, the rendezvous is from the last time you queried the device to the next time you query it. So we don't lose any of those rendezvous. So rendezvous, for example, are between the two samples. When you query object counts, it's a point in time. So at the moment that you make the request, it'll go through and figure out what all the object allocations are, and then report that for you. So it's both. It's both a delta for some samples and an instant time shot for CPU utilization, memory utilization, and object counts.
So that's a balance you need to strike depending on what exactly it is you're trying to debug or get out of the thing. Is because if you have a very long polling sample, I think this is where the question was going. If you have, say, a 5 second polling sample, and in between two samples you create and then destroy an object, it'll never show up in any of these charts because it just didn't exist when it polled for that data.
Okay. All right, next question. Speaking of ECP, my biggest two requests are 1, reboot, and 2, check for Roku OS updates.
Okay.
So I know I've read in the Roku developer Slack, we've had some developers that have commented that updates are not being pushed, OS updates are not being pushed to their device, even though the device is connected to a network and powered on. And that might be some of what this question is touching on. Or I
Yeah,
could
I
just
mean, you can definitely check what version is installed, right? You can do a device info and find out what's installed, but forcing it to do a check, off the top of my head, I don't think that's possible right now. But that's a good one. Reboot and checking for updates are both, I can see the value in those. In fact, reboot, I just off the top of my head again, reboot, you could probably do manually, right? You could probably send key press commands, up, right, and get there. It might be a little tricky, but I think you could probably get yourself to reboot with what's there now, but having a direct command would definitely be useful.
Okay. And yes, so we have the follow-up to that is we have a device farm that we currently manage using key press scripts. So Kevin's suggestion would be greatly appreciated. Good to know. Good to know. Thank you for that. Okay. We've got a couple minutes left. Anybody else wants to squeeze in a couple questions, comments, suggestions, feature requests? Do you have any tips on saving custom font packages in the channel, considering they can be pretty large? but sometimes needed to support languages that the system fonts don't.
Yeah, I think again, my biggest tip would be try not to do that. I suppose you could put it on a server and then download it at runtime and stash it locally in temp or something. Um, but yeah, I don't have any good suggestions for that.
Neither do I.
Okay. All right, last question I have off the top of my head is run as process equals 1 still needed in OS 14.5 and above? Thank you for the improvements and this webinar.
I think the answer is no. It's by default now.
I think that changed in 14.1, if I remember right. That by default, you don't need run as process equals 1 anymore.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and wrap it up and call it a day, but I'll give you all just 1 or 2 more minutes to squeeze something in. Are we able to see more VOD details on the RRM graphs, like exact buffer duration?
There are some beacons I think that show up in RRM today around playback start times. I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, but yeah, that's a good suggestion that we could look into.
Yeah, you can see app compilation beacons. You can see the VOD launch beacon. If that is not what you're looking for, let us know. We'll see how we can overlay on the beacon. You have the beacons are interesting. You have a start and an end sample, so you can see the duration between those two. That gets highlighted on the x-axis of each panel that you can see.
Yep, there's a VOD start duration, which is helpful. Getting additional info would be even more helpful, like buffer duration.
Okay. Yeah, noted. There are in scene graph, on the video node, there are some fields you can observe that give you some more detailed video information. So you could instrument that yourself in theory, but yeah, having it in the tool would be useful.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Would it be possible to get a channel performance score in RRM to help developers with many channels know which ones they need to focus on?
That's an interesting concept. Yeah, I think yeah, right now I can't really get my head around immediately how we would do that. But definitely a cool idea.
Okay. All right. So we are almost at time. We've got about 3 minutes left for the scheduled duration of this webinar. If we have any more questions, sneak them in now. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. And again, we'll be uploading the replay on YouTube, on the Roku developers Roku channel. And so you'll be able to view all of the video presentation of the new features on Roku Resource Monitor 4.0, as well as the Q&A that we just had here. So, okay. I think we're good. Thank you so much, everybody, and happy Monday from wherever you are in the world. And I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you.